Chapter 1. The Flame of Tar Valon. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend, then fade to myth, and are long forgot when that age comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of doom. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time. But it was a beginning, born among black, knife-edged peaks, where death roamed the high passes, yet hid from things still more dangerous. The wind blew south across the tangled forest of the Great Blight, a forest tainted and twisted by the touch of the Dark One. The sickly sweet smell of corruption faded by the time the wind crossed that invisible line men called the border of Shienar, where spring flowers hung thick in the trees. It should have been summer by now, but spring had been late in coming, and the land had run wild to catch up. New-come pale green bristled on every bush, and red new growth tipped every tree branch. The wind rippled farmers' fields like verdant ponds, solid with crops that almost seemed to creep upward visibly. The smell of death was all but gone long before the wind reached the stone-walled town of Valdara on its hills, and whipped around a tower of the fortress in the very center of the town, a tower atop which two men seemed to dance. Hard-walled and high Valdara, both keep and town, never taken, never betrayed. The wind moaned across wood-shingled rooftops, around tall stone chimneys and taller towers, moaned like a dirge. Stripped to the waist, Randall Thor shivered at the wind's cold caress, and his fingers flexed on the long hilt of the practice sword he held. The hot sun had slicked his chest, and his dark, reddish hair clung to his head in a sweat-curled mat. A faint odor in the swirl of air made his nose twitch, but he did not connect the smell with the image of an old grave fresh opened that flashed through his head. He was barely aware of odor or image at all. He strove to keep his mind empty, but the other man sharing the tower top with him kept intruding on the emptiness. 10 paces across, the tower top was, encircled by a chest-high, crenellated wall, big enough and more not to feel crowded, except when shared with a warder. Young as he was, Rand was taller than most men, but Lan stood just as tall and more heavily muscled, if not quite so broad in the shoulders. A narrow band of braided leather held the warder's long hair back from his face, a face that seemed made from stony planes and angles, a face unlined as if to belie the tinge of grey at his temples. Despite the heat and exertion, only a light coat of sweat glistened on his chest and arms. Rand searched Lan's icy blue eyes, hunting for some hint of what the other man intended. The warder never seemed to blink, and the practice sword in his hands moved surely and smoothly as he flowed from one stance to another. With a bundle of thin, loosely bound staves in place of a blade, the practice sword would make a loud clack when it struck anything, and leave a welt where it hit flesh. Rand knew all too well. 3 thin red lines stung on his ribs, and another burned his shoulder. It had taken all his efforts not to wear more decorations. Lan bore not a mark. As he had been taught, Rand formed a single flame in his mind and concentrated on it, tried to feed all emotion and passion into it, to form a void within himself, with even thought outside. Emptiness came. As was too often the case of late, it was not a perfect emptiness. The flame still remained, or some sense of light sending ripples through the stillness. But it was enough, barely. The cool peace of the void crept over him, and he was one with the practice sword, with the smooth stones under his boots, even with Lan. All was one, and he moved without thought in a rhythm that matched the warder step for step, and move for move. The wind rose again, bringing the ringing of bells from the town. Somebody's still celebrating that spring has finally come. The extraneous thought fluttered through the void on waves of light, disturbing the emptiness, and as if the warder could read Rand's mind, the practice sword whirled in Lan's hands. For a long minute, the swift clack-clack-clack of bundled lathes meeting filled the tower top. Rand made no effort to reach the other man. It was all he could do to keep the warder's strikes from reaching him. Turning Lan's blows at the last possible moment, he was forced back. Lan's expression never changed. The practice sword seemed alive in his hands. Abruptly, the warder's swinging slash changed in mid-motion to a thrust. Caught by surprise, Rand stepped back, already wincing with the blow. He knew he could not stop this time. The wind howled across the tower and trapped him. It was as if the air had suddenly gelled, holding him in a cocoon, pushing him forward. Time and motion slowed. Horrified, he watched Lan's practice sword drift toward his chest. There was nothing slow or soft about the impact. His ribs creaked as if he had been struck with a hammer. He grunted, but the wind would not allow him to give way. It still carried him forward instead. The lathes of Lan's practiced sword flexed and bent. Ever so slowly it seemed to Rand, then shattered, sharp points oozing toward his heart, jagged lathes piercing his skin. Pain lanced through his body. His whole skin felt slashed. He burned as though the sun had flared to crisp him like bacon in a pan. With a shout, he threw himself stumbling back, falling against the stone wall. Hand trembling, he touched the gashes on his chest and raised bloody fingers before his grey eyes in disbelief. "And what was that fool move, sheepherder?" Lan grated. "You know better by now, or should, unless you have forgotten everything I've tried to teach you. How badly are you?" He cut off as Rand looked up at him. The wind. Rand's mouth was dry. It pushed me. It was solid as a wall. The warder stared at him in silence, then offered a hand. Rand took it and let himself be pulled to his feet. "Strange things can happen this close to the Blight," Lan said finally, but for all the flatness of the words he sounded troubled. That in itself was strange. Warders, those half-legendary warriors who served the Aes Sedai, seldom showed emotion, and Lan showed little even for a warder. He tossed the shattered lathe sword aside and leaned against the wall where their real swords lay, out of the way of their practice. "Not like that," Rand protested. He joined the other man, squatting with his back against the stone. That way the top of the wall was higher than his head, protection of a kind from the wind. If it was a wind, no wind had ever felt. Solid. "A month since you said you were going, and I thought you'd be 2 weeks gone by now." Rand stared up at him in surprise. He's acting like nothing happened. Frowning, he set down the practice sword and lifted his real sword to his knees, fingers running along the long, leather-wrapped hilt inset with a bronze heron. Another bronze heron stood on the scabbard, and yet another was scribed on the sheathed blade. It was still a little strange to him that he had a sword. Any sword, much less one with a blademaster's mark. He was a farmer from the Two Rivers, so far away now. Maybe far away forever now. There was a shepherd, what am I now? And his father had given him a heron-marked sword. Tam is my father, no matter what anybody says. He wished his own thoughts did not sound as if he was trying to convince himself. Again, Lan seemed to read his mind. In the borderlands, sheepherder, if a man has the raising of a child, that child is his, and none can say different. Scowling, Rand ignored the warder's words. It was no one's business but his own. I want to learn how to use this. I need to. It had caused him problems, carrying a heron-marked sword. Not everybody knew what it meant, or even noticed it, but even so a heron-marked blade, especially in the hands of a youth barely old enough to be called a man, still attracted the wrong sort of attention. I've been able to bluff sometimes when I could not run, and I've been lucky besides. But what happens when I can't run, and I can't bluff, and my luck runs out? You could sell it, Lan said carefully. That blade is rare even among heron-marked swords. It would fetch a pretty price. No. It was an idea he had thought of more than once, but he rejected it now for the same reason he always had, and more fiercely for coming from someone else. As long as I keep it, I have the right to call Tam father. He gave it to me, and it gives me the right. I thought any heron-marked blade was rare. Dan gave him a sidelong look. He didn't tell you. Then, he must know. Perhaps he didn't believe. Many do not. He snatched up his own sword, almost the twin of Rand's except for the lack of herons, and whipped off the scabbard. The blade, slightly curved and single-edged, glittered silvery in the sunlight. It was the sword of the kings of Malkier. Lan did not speak of it. He did not even like others to speak of it. But all Lan Mandragoran was Lord of the Seven Towers, Lord of the Lakes, and uncrowned King of Malkier. The Seven Towers were broken now, and the 1,000 Lakes the lair of unclean things. Malkier lay swallowed by the Great Blight, and of all the Malkieri lords, only one still lived. Some said Larn had become a warder, bonding himself to an Aes Sedai, so he could seek death in the Blight and join the rest of his blood. Rand had indeed seen Larn put himself in harm's way seemingly without regard for his own safety, but far beyond his own life and safety he held those of Moraine, the Aes Sedai who held his bond. Turning his blade in the light, Lan spoke. In the War of the Shadow, the One Power itself was used as a weapon, and weapons were made with the One Power. Some weapons used the One Power, things that could destroy an entire city at one blow, lay waste to the land for leagues. Just as well, those were all lost in the breaking. Just as well, no one remembers the making of them. But there were simpler weapons too, for those who would face Myrddraal, and worse things the Dreadlords made, blade to blade. With the One Power, Aes Sedai drew iron and other metals from the earth, smelted them, formed and wrought them, all with the power. Swords and other weapons too. Many that survived the breaking of the world were destroyed by men who feared and hated Aes Sedai work, and others have vanished with the years. Few remain, and few men truly know what they are. There have been legends of them, swollen tales of swords that seem to have a power of their own. You've heard the Gleeman's tales. The reality is enough, blades that will not shatter or break and never lose their edge. I've seen men sharpening them, playing at sharpening as it were, but only because they could not believe a sword did not need it after use. All they ever did was wear away their oil stones. Those weapons the Aes Sedai made, and there will never be others. When it was done, war and age ended together, with the world shattered, with more dead unburied than there were alive, and those alive fleeing, trying to find some place, any place of safety, with every second woman weeping because she'd never see husband or sons again. When it was done, the Aes Sedai, who still lived, swore they would never again make a weapon for one man to kill another. Every Aes Sedai swore it, and every woman of them since has kept that oath. Even the Red Aja, and they care little what happens to any male. One of those swords, a plain soldier's sword with a faint grimace, almost sad if the warder could be said to show emotion, he slid the blade back into its sheath. Became something more. On the other hand, those made for Lord Generals with blades so hard no bladesmith could mark them, yet marked already with a heron, those blades became sought after. Rand's hands jerked away from the sword propped on his knees. It toppled, and instinctively he grabbed it before it hit the floor stones. You mean Aes Sedai made this? I thought you were talking about your sword. Not all heron-marked blades are Aes Sedai work. Few men handle a sword with the skill to be named Blade Master and be awarded a heron-marked blade, but even so, not enough Aes Sedai blades remain for more than a handful to have one. Most come from master bladesmiths, the finest steel men can make, yet still wrought by a man's hands. But that one, sheepherder, that one could tell a tale of 3,000 years and more. I can't get away from them, Rand said, can I? He balanced the sword in front of him on scabbard point. It looked no different than it had before he knew. Aes Sedai work, but Tam gave it to me. My father gave it to me. He refused to think of how a Two Rivers shepherd had come by a heron-marked blade. There were dangerous currents in such thoughts. Deeps he did not want to explore. Do you really want to get away, sheepherder? I'll ask again. Why are you not gone, then? The sword. In 5 years I could make you worthy of it, make you a blade master. You have quick wrists, good balance. You don't make the same mistake twice. But I do not have 5 years to give over to teaching you. And you do not have 5 years for learning. You have not even 1 year, and you know it. As it is, you will not stab yourself in the foot. You hold yourself as if the sword belongs at your waist, sheepherder, and most village bullies will sense it. But you've had that much almost since the day you put it on. So why are you still here? Matt and Perrin are still here, Rand mumbled. I don't want to leave before they do. I might not see them again for years, maybe. His head dropped back against the wall. Blood and ashes. At least they just think I'm crazy not to go home with them. Half the time, Nynaeve looks at me like I'm 6 years old and I've skinned my knee, and she's going to make it better. The other half, she looks like she's seeing a stranger. One she might offend if she looks too closely at that. She's a wisdom, and besides that, I don't think she's ever been afraid of anything. But she... She shook his head. She knows why I have to go, but every time I mention it, she looks at me, and I nod up inside, and... He closed his eyes, pressing the sword hilt against his forehead as if he could press what he was thinking out of existence. I wish... You wish everything could be the way it was, Sheepherder? Or you wish the girl would go with you instead of to Tar Valon? You think she'll give up becoming an Aes Sedai for a life of wandering? With you? If you put it to her in the right way, she might. Love is an odd thing. Lan sounded suddenly weary. As odd a thing as there is. No, it was what he had been wishing, that she would want to go with him. He opened his eyes and squared his back and made his voice firm. No, I wouldn't let her come with me if she did ask. He could not do that to her. But Light, wouldn't it be sweet, just for a minute, if she said she wanted to? She gets muley stubborn if she thinks I'm trying to tell her what to do, but I can still protect her from that. He wished she were back home in Eamon's Field, but all hope of that had gone the day Moraine came to the Two Rivers. Even if it means she does become an Aes Sedai. The corner of his eye caught Lan's raised eyebrow and he flushed. And that is all the reason. You want to spend as much time as you can with your friends from home before they go. That's why you're dragging your feet. You know what's sniffing at your heels. Rand surged angrily to his feet. All right, it's Moraine. I wouldn't even be here if not for her. And she won't as much as talk to me. You'd be dead if not for her, Sheepherder, Lan said flatly. But Rand rushed on. She tells me horrible things about myself. His knuckles whitened on the sword. That I'm going to go mad and die. And then suddenly she won't even say 2 words to me. She acts as if I'm no different than the day she found me, and that smells wrong too. You want her to treat you like what you are. No, I don't mean that. Burn me. I don't know what I mean half the time. I don't want that, and I'm scared of the other. Now she's gone off somewhere, banished. Told you she needs to be alone sometimes. It isn't for you or anyone else to question her actions, without telling anybody where she was going, or when she'd be back, or even if she would be back. She has to be able to tell me something to help me, Lan. Something. She has to. If she ever comes back. She's back, Sheepherder. Last night, but I think she has told you all she can. Be satisfied. You've learned what you can from her. With a shake of his head, Lan's voice became brisk. You certainly aren't learning anything standing there. Time for a little balance work. Go through parting the silk, beginning from heron wading in the rushes. Remember that heron form is only for practicing balance. Anywhere but doing forms, it leaves you wide open. You can strike home from it, if you wait for the other man to move first, but you'll never avoid his blade. She has to be able to tell me something, Lan. That wind, it wasn't natural, and I don't care how close to the blight we are. Heron wading in the rushes, Sheepherder, and mind your wrists. From the south came a faint peal of trumpets, a rolling fanfare slowly growing louder, accompanied by the steady thrum-thrum-thrum of drums. For a moment, Rand and Lan stared at each other, then the drums drew them to the tower wall to stare southward. The city stood on high hills, the land around the city walls cleared to ankle height for a full mile in all directions, and the keep covered the highest hill of all. From the tower top, Rand had a clear view across the chimneys and roofs to the forest, The drummers appeared first from the trees, a dozen of them, drums lifting as they stepped to their own beat, mallets whirling. Next came trumpeters, long, shining horns raised, still calling the flourish. At that distance, Rand could not make out the huge, square banner whipping in the wind behind them. Lan grunted though. The warder had eyes like a snow eagle. Rand glanced at him, but the warder said nothing, his eyes intent on the column emerging from the forest. Mounted men in armor rode out of the trees, and women a horseback too. Then a palanquin borne by horses, one before and one behind, its curtains down, and more men on horseback. Ranks of men afoot, pikes rising above them like a bristle of long thorns, and archers with their bows held slanted across their chests, all stepping to the drums. The trumpets cried again. Like a singing serpent, the column wound its way toward Fal Dara. The wind flapped the banner, taller than a man, straight out to one side. As big as it was close enough now for Rand to see clearly. A swirl of colors that meant nothing to him, but at the heart of it, a shape like a pure white teardrop. His breath froze in his throat. Ingtas with them. Lan sounded as if his thoughts were elsewhere. Back from his hunting at last. Been gone long enough. I wonder if he had any luck. Aes Sedai, Rand whispered when he finally could. All those women out there. Moiraine was Aes Sedai, yes, but he had traveled with her, and if he did not entirely trust her, at least he knew her. So many Aes Sedai together, and coming like this, was something else again. He cleared his throat when he spoke, his voice grated. Why so many, Lan? Why any at all? And with drums and trumpets and a banner to announce them. Aes Sedai were respected in Shi'Enar, at least by most people, and the rest respectfully feared them. But Rand had been in places where it was different, where there was only the fear and often hate. Where he had grown up, some men, at least, spoke of Tar Valon witches as they would speak of the Dark One. He tried to comp the women, but they kept no ranks or order, moving their horses around to converse with one another, or with whoever was in the palanquin. Goosebumps covered him. He had traveled with Moiraine and met another Aes Sedai, and he had begun to think of himself as worldly. Nobody ever left the Two Rivers, or almost nobody, but he had. He had seen things no one back in the Two Rivers had ever laid eyes on. Done things they had only dreamed of, if they had dreamed so far. He had seen a queen and met the daughter Heir of Andor, faced a Myrddraal and traveled the ways, and none of it had prepared him for this moment. Why so many? He whispered again. The Amyrlin seats come in person. Lan looked at him, his expression as hard and unreadable as a rock. Your lessons are done, Sheepherder. He paused then, and Rand almost thought there was sympathy on his face. That could not be, of course. Better for you if you were a week gone. With that, the warder snatched up his shirt and disappeared down the ladder into the tower. Rand worked his mouth, trying to get a little moisture. He stared at the column approaching Fal Dara as if it really were a snake, a deadly viper. The drums and trumpets sang, loud in his ears, the Amyrlin seat who ordered the Aes Sedai. She's come because of me. He could think of no other reason. He knew things. Had knowledge that could help him, he was sure, and he did not dare ask any of them. He was afraid they had come to gentle him, and afraid they haven't too, he admitted reluctantly. Light, I don't know which scares me more. I didn't mean to channel the power, he whispered. It was an accident. Light, I don't want anything to do with it. I swear I'll never touch it again. I swear it. With a start, he realized that the Aes Sedai party was entering the city gates. The wind swirled up fiercely, chilling his sweat like droplets of ice, making the trumpets sound like sly laughter. He thought he could smell an opened grave strong in the air. My grave, if I keep standing here. Chapter 2. The Welcome. The halls of Fal Dara Keep, their smooth stone walls sparsely decorated with elegantly simple tapestries and painted screens, bustled with news of the Amyrlin seat's imminent arrival. Servants in black and gold darted about their tasks, running to prepare rooms or carry orders to the kitchens, moaning that they could not have everything ready for so great a personage when they had had no warning. Dark-eyed warriors, their heads shaven except for a topknot bound with a leather cord, did not run, but haste filled their steps and their faces shone with an excitement normally reserved for battle. Some of the men spoke as Rand hurried past. "Ah, there you are, Randall Thor. Peace, favor your sword. On your way to clean up. You'll want to look your best when you are presented to the Amelin seat. She'll want to see you and your two friends as well as the women. You can count on it." He trotted toward the broad stairs, wide enough for 20 men abreast, that led up to the men's apartments. The Amerlin herself, come with no more warning than a pack peddler. Must be because of Moiraine Sedai and you Southerners, eh? What else? The wide iron-bound doors of the men's apartments stood open and half-jammed with top-knotted men buzzing with the Amerlin's arrival. "Oh, Southlander, the Amerlin's here. Come for you and your friends, I suppose. Peace, what honor for you. She seldom leaves Tar Valon, and she's never come to the borderlands in my memory." He fended them all off with a few words. He had to wash. Find a clean shirt. No time to talk. They thought they understood and let him go. Not a one of them knew a thing, except that he and his friends traveled in company with an Aes Sedai. That two of his friends were women who were going to Tar Valon to train as Aes Sedai, but their words stabbed at him as if they knew everything. "She's come for me." He dashed through the men's apartments, darted into the room he shared with Matt and Perrin, and froze, his jaw dropping in astonishment. The room was filled with women wearing the black and gold, all working purposefully. It was not a big room, and its windows, a pair of tall, narrow arrow slits looking down on one of the inner courtyards, did nothing to make it seem larger. 3 beds on black and white tiled platforms, each with a chest at the foot, 3 plain chairs, a washstand by the door, and a tall, wide wardrobe crowded the room. The 8 women in there seemed like fish in a basket. The women barely glanced at him, and went right on clearing his clothes, and Matt's and Perrin's out of the wardrobe and replacing them with new. Anything found in the pockets was put atop the chests, and the old clothes were bundled up carelessly, like rags. "What are you doing?" he demanded when he caught his breath. "Those are my clothes." One of the women sniffed and poked a finger through a tear in the sleeve of his only coat, then added it to the pile on the floor. Another, a black-haired woman with a big ring of keys at her waist, set her eyes on him. That was Elansu, Chatayan of the Keep. He thought of the sharp-faced woman as a housekeeper, though the house she kept was a fortress, and scores of servants did her bidding. Moiraine Sedai said all of your clothes are worn out, and the Lady Amalisa had new made to give you. Just keep out of our way, she added firmly, and we will be done the quicker. There were few men the Chatayan could not bully into doing as she wished. Some said even Lord Agelmar, and she plainly did not expect any trouble with one man young enough to be her son. He swallowed what he had been going to say. There was no time for arguing. The Amelin seat could be sending for him at any minute. "Honor to the Lady Amalisa for her gift," he managed after the Shianaran way, "and honor to you, Elansu Chatayan. Please convey my words to the Lady Amalisa and tell her I said, heart and soul to serve. But now, if you'll pardon me, I want to change." "That is well," Elansu said comfortably. Moiraine Sedai said to remove all the old, every stitch. Small clothes, too. Several of the women eyed him sideways. None of them made a move toward the door. He bit his cheek to keep from laughing hysterically. Many ways were different in Shianar from what he was used to, and there were some to which he would never become accustomed if he lived forever. He had taken to bathing in the small hours of the morning when the big, tiled pools were empty of people, after he discovered that at any other time a woman might well climb into the water with him. It could be a scullion or the Lady Amalisa, Lord Agelmar's sister herself. The baths were one place in Shiana where there was no rank, expecting him to scrub her back in return for the same favor, asking him why his face was so red, had he taken too much sun. They had soon learned to recognize his blushes for what they were, and not a woman in the keep but seemed fascinated by them. "I might be dead or worse in another hour, and they're waiting to see me blush." He cleared his throat. "If you wait outside, I will pass the rest out to you." "On my honor." One of the women gave a soft chortle and even Elansu's lips twitched, but the Shatayan nodded and directed the other women to gather up the bundles they had made. She was the last to leave, and she paused in the doorway to add, "The boots, too." Moraine Sedai said everything. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His boots, at least, were certainly still good, made by Alwyn Alvan, the cobbler back in Emmons Field, and well broken in and comfortable. But if giving up his boots would make the Shatayan leave him alone so he could go, he would give her the boots and anything else she wanted. He had no time. Yes, of course, on my honor. He pushed on the door, forcing her out. Alone, he dropped onto his bed to tug off his boots. They were still good, a little worn, the leather cracked here and there but still wearable and well broken, in to fit his feet. Then hastily stripped off, piling everything atop the boots, and washed at the basin just as quickly. The water was cold. The water was always cold in the men's apartments. The wardrobe had 3 wide doors carved in the simple Shianaran manner, suggesting more than showing a series of waterfalls and rocky pools. Pulling open the center door, he stared for a moment at what had replaced the few garments he had brought with him. A dozen high-collared coats of the finest wool, and as well cut as any he had ever seen on a merchant's back or a lord's, most embroidered like feast day clothes. A dozen. 3 shirts for every coat, both linen and silk, with wide sleeves and tight cuffs. 2 cloaks. 2, when he had made do with one at a time all his life. One cloak was plain, stout wool and dark green. The other deep blue with a stiff standing collar embroidered in gold with herons. And high on the left breast, where a lord would wear his sign. His hand drifted to the cloak of its own accord. As if uncertain what they would feel, his fingers brushed the stitching of a serpent curled almost into a circle. But a serpent with 4 legs and a lion's golden mane, scaled in crimson and gold, its feet each tipped with 5 golden claws. His hand jerked back as if burned. Light, help me. Was it Amalisa had this made, or Moraine? Un many saw it. How many know what it is, what it means? Even one is too many. Burn me. She's trying to get me killed. Bloody Moiraine won't even talk to me. But now she's given me bloody fine new clothes to die in. A rap at the door sent him leaping half out of his skin. "Are you done?" came Elansu's voice. "Every stitch now. Perhaps I had better." A creak, as if she were trying the knob. With a start, Rand realized he was still naked. "Undone," he shouted. "Yes. Don't come in." Hurriedly, he gathered up what he had been wearing, boots and all. "I'll bring them!" Hiding behind the door, he opened it just wide enough to shove the bundle into the arms of the Shatayan. "That's everything." She tried to peer through the gap. "Are you sure?" Moraine Sedai said everything. "Perhaps I had better just look." "It's everything," he growled. "On my honor." He shouldered the door shut in her face and heard laughter from the other side. Muttering under his breath, he dressed hurriedly. He would not put it past any of them to find some excuse to come bullying in anyway. The grey breeches were snugger than he was used to, but still comfortable. And the shirt, with its billowy sleeves, was white enough to satisfy any good wife in Emmons Field on laundry day. The knee-high boots fit as if he had worn them a year. He hoped it was just a good cobbler, and not more Aes Sedai work. All of these clothes would make a pack as big as he was. Yet he had grown used to the comfort of clean shirts again, of not wearing the same breeches day after day until sweat and dirt made them as stiff as his boots, then wearing them still. He took his saddlebags from his chest and stuffed what he could into them, then reluctantly spread the fancy cloak out on the bed and piled a few more shirts and breeches on that. Folded with the dangerous sigil inside and tied with a cord looped so it could be slung on a shoulder, it looked not much different from the packs he had seen carried by other young men on the road. A peal of trumpets rolled through the arrow slits. Trumpets calling the fanfare from outside the walls, trumpets answering from the keep towers. "I'll pick out the stitching when I get a chance," he muttered. He had seen women picking out embroidery when they had made a mistake or changed their mind on the pattern, and it did not look very hard. The rest of the clothes, most of them in fact, he stuffed back into the wardrobe. No need to leave evidence of flight to be found by the first person to poke a head in after he went. Still frowning, he knelt beside his bed. The tiled platforms on which the beds rested were stoves, where a small fire damped down to burn all night could keep the bed warm through the worst night in a Shienaran winter. The nights were still cooler than he was used to this time of year, but blankets were enough for warmth now. Pulling open the firebox door, he took out a bundle he could not leave behind. He was glad Elansu had not thought anyone would keep clothes in there. Setting the bundle atop the blankets, he untied one end and partially unfolded it. A gleeman's cloak turned inside out to hide the hundreds of patches that covered it, patches in every size and color imaginable. The cloak itself was sound enough. The patches were a gleeman's badge, had been a gleeman's badge. Inside nestled two hard leather cases. The larger held a harp which he never touched. The harp was never meant for a farmer's clumsy fingers, boy. The other, long and slim, contained the gold and silver chased flute he had used to earn his supper and bed more than once since leaving home. Tom Merrilin had taught him to play that flute before the gleeman died. Rand could never touch it without remembering Tom, with his sharp blue eyes and his long white mustaches, shoving the bundled cloak into his hands and shouting for him to run. And then Tom had run himself, knives appearing magically in his hands as if he were performing to face the murderer that was coming to kill them. With a shiver, he redid the bundle. That's all over with. Thinking of the wind on the tower top, he added, "Strange things happen this close to the Blight." He was not sure he believed it, not the way Lan had apparently meant it. In any case, even without the Amelin seat, it was past time for him to be gone from Faldara. Shrugging into the coat he had kept out. It was a deep, dark green, and made him think of the forests at home, Tam's Westwood farm where he had grown up, and the Waterwood where he had learned to swim. He buckled the heron-marked sword to his waist and hung his quiver, bristling with arrows, on the other side. His unstrung bow stood propped in the corner with Matt's and Perrin's, the stave 2 hands taller than he was. He had made it himself since coming to Faldara, and besides him, only Lan and Perrin could draw it. Stuffing his blanket roll and his new cloak through the loops on his bundles, he slung the pair from his left shoulder, tossed his saddlebags atop the cords, and grabbed the bow. Leave the sword arm free, he thought. Make them think I'm dangerous. Maybe somebody will. Cracking the door revealed the hall all but empty. One liveried servant dashed by, but he never so much as glanced at Rand. As soon as the man's rapid footfalls faded, Rand slipped out into the corridor. He tried to walk naturally, casually, but with saddlebags on his shoulder and bundles on his back, he knew he looked like what he was, a man setting out on a journey and not meaning to come back. The trumpets called again, sounding fainter here inside the keep. He had a horse, a tall bay stallion in the north stable, called the Lord's Stable, close by the sally gate that Lord Egwene used when he went riding. Neither the Lord of Faldara nor any of his family would be riding today, though, and the stable might be empty except for the stable boys. There were 2 ways to reach the Lord's stable from Rand's room. One would take him all the way around the keep, behind Lord Egomar's private garden, then down the far side and through the farrier's smithy. Likewise certainly empty now, to the stable yard. Time enough that way for orders to be given, for a search to start before he reached his horse. The other was far shorter, first across the outer courtyard, where even now the Amelin seat was arriving with another dozen or more Aes Sedai. His skin prickled at the thought. He had had more than enough of Aes Sedai for any sane lifetime. One was too many. Yo! All the stories said it, and he knew it for fact. But he was not surprised when his feet took him toward the outer courtyard. He would never see legendary Tar Valon. He could not afford that risk, now or ever, but he might catch a glimpse of the Amelin seat before he left. That would be as much as seeing a queen. There can't be anything dangerous in just looking from a distance. I'll keep moving and be gone before she ever knows I was there. He opened a heavy iron-strapped door onto the outer courtyard and stepped out into silence. People forested the guard walk atop every wall, top-knotted soldiers and liveried servants, and menials still in their muck, all pressed together cheek by jowl, with children sitting on shoulders to look over their elders' heads or squeezing in to peer around waists and knees. Every archer's balcony was packed like a barrel of apples, and faces even showed in the narrow arrow slits in the walls. A thick mass of people bordered the courtyard like another wall, and all of them watched and waited in silence. He pushed his way along the wall, in front of the smithies and Fletcher's stalls that lined the court. Valere was a fortress, not a palace, despite its size and grim grandeur, and everything about it served that end, apologizing quietly to the people he jostled. Some looked around with a frown, and a few gave a second stare to his saddlebags and bundles, but none broke the silence. Most did not even bother to look at who had bumped past them. He could easily see over the heads of most of them, enough to make out clearly what was going on in the courtyard. Just inside the main gate, a line of men stood beside their horses, 14 of them. No two wore the same kind of armor or carried the same sort of sword, and none looked like Lan. But Rand did not doubt they were warders. Round faces, square faces, long faces, narrow faces, they all had the look as if they saw things other men did not see, heard things other men did not hear. Standing at their ease, they looked as deadly as a pack of wolves. Only one other thing about them was alike. One and all, they wore the color-shifting cloak he had first seen on Lan, the cloak that often seemed to fade into whatever was behind it. It did not make for easy watching or a still stomach, so many men in those cloaks. A dozen paces in front of the warders, a row of women stood by their horses' heads, the cowls of their cloaks thrown back. He could count them now. 14 Aes Sedai. They must be. Tall and short, slender and plump, dark and fair, hair cut short or long, hanging loose down their backs or braided. Their clothes were as different as the warders were, in as many cuts and colors as there were women. Yet they too had a sameness, one that was only obvious when they stood together like this. To a woman, they seemed ageless. From this distance, he would have called them all young, but closer, he knew they would be like Moiraine. Young, seeming yet not, smooth-skinned but with faces too mature for youth, eyes too knowing. Closer? Ooh, I'm too close already. Burn me. I should have gone the long way. He pressed on toward his goal, another iron-bound door at the far end of the court, but he could not stop looking. Calmly, the Aes Sedai ignored the onlookers and kept their attention on the curtained palanquin, now in the center of the courtyard. The horses bearing it held as still as if ostlers stood at their harness, but there was only one tall woman beside the palanquin. Her face an Aes Sedai's face, and she paid no mind to the horses. The staff she held upright before her with both hands was as tall as she, the gilded flame capping it standing above her eyes. Lord Egwene faced the palanquin from the far end of the court, bluff and square, and face unreadable. His high-collared coat of dark blue bore the 3 running red foxes of the House Jagad, as well as the stooping black hawk of Shienar. Beside him stood Ronan, age withered but still tall. 3 foxes carved from red avatine topped the tall staff the Shambayan bore. Ronan was Elansu's equal in ordering the keep, Shambayan and Shatayan. But Elansu left little for him except ceremonies and acting as Lord Egween's secretary. Both men's top knots were snow-white. All of them. The warders, the Aes Sedai, the Lord of Valere, and his Shambayan stood as still as stone. The watching crowd seemed to hold its breath. Despite himself, Rand slowed. Suddenly Ronan rapped his staff loudly 3 times on the broad paving stones, calling into the silence. "Who comes here? Who comes here? Who comes here?" The woman beside the palanquin tapped her staff 3 times in reply. The Watcher of the Seals, the Flame of Tar Valon. The Amelin seat. "Why should we watch?" Ronan demanded. "For the hope of humankind," the tall woman replied. "Against what do we guard?" The shadow at noon. "How long shall we guard? From rising sun to rising sun, so long as the wheel of time turns." Egwene bowed, his white topknot stirring in the breeze. Valere offers bread and salt and welcome. Welcome is the Amelin seat to Valere, for here is the watch kept, here is the pact maintained. Welcome. The tall woman drew back the curtain of the palanquin, and the Amelin seat stepped out. Dark-haired, ageless as all Aes Sedai were ageless, she ran her eyes over the assembled watchers as she straightened. Rand flinched when her gaze crossed him. He felt as if he had been touched, but her eyes passed on and came to rest on Lord Egwene. A liveried servant knelt at her side with folded towels, steam still rising on a silver tray. Formally, she wiped her hands and patted her face with a damp cloth. "I offer thanks for your welcome, my son. May the light illumine House Jagad. May the light illumine Faldara and all her people." Agilmar bowed again. "You honor us, mother." It did not sound odd, her calling him son, or him calling her mother, though comparing her smooth cheeks to his craggy face made him seem more like her father, or even grandfather. She had a presence that more than matched his. "House Jagad is yours. Faldara is yours." Cheers rose on every side, crashing against the walls of the keep like breaking waves. Shivering, Rand hurried toward the door to safety, careless of whom he bumped into now. "Just your bloody imagination. She doesn't even know who you are." Not yet, blood and ashes, if she did. He did not want to think of what would have happened if she knew who he was, what he was. What would happen when she finally found out? He wondered if she had had anything to do with the wind atop the tower. Aes Sedai could do things like that. When he pushed through that door and slammed it shut behind him, muting the roar of welcome that still shook the courtyard, he heaved a relieved sigh. The halls here were as empty as the others had been, and he all but ran. Out across a smaller courtyard, with a fountain splashing in the center, down yet another corridor, and out into the flagstone stable yard. The Lord's stable itself, built into the wall of the keep, stood tall and long, with big windows here inside the walls, and horses kept on 2 floors. The smithy across the courtyard stood silent, the farrier and his helpers gone to see the welcome. Tema, the leathery-faced head groom, met him at the wide doors with a deep bow, touching his forehead and then his heart. "Spirit and heart to serve, my lord. How may Tema serve, my lord?" No warrior's topknot here. Tema's hair sat on his head like an inverted grey bowl. Rand sighed. "For the 100th time, Temai, I am not a lord." "As my lord wishes." The groom's bow was even lower this time. It was his name that caused the problem, and a similarity. Rand Old Thor. Or Lan Mandragoran. For Lan, according to the custom of Malkia, the royal Al named him king, though he never used it himself. For Rand, Al was just a part of his name, though he had heard that once long ago, before the 2 Rivers was called the 2 Rivers, it had meant son of. Some of the servants in Faldara Keep, though, had taken it to mean he was a king too, or at least a prince. All of his argument to the contrary had only managed to demote him to lord. At least, he thought it had. He had never seen quite so much bowing and scraping, even with Lord Egilmar. "I need red saddle, Tema." He knew better than to offer to do it himself. Tema would not let Rand soil his hands. "I thought I'd spend a few days seeing the country around the town." Once he was on the big bay stallion's back, a few days would see him at the River Erenin, or across the border into Arafel. "They'll never find me then." The groom bent himself almost double, and stayed bent. "Forgive, my lord," he whispered hoarsely. "Forgive, but Tema cannot obey." Flushing with embarrassment, Rand took an anxious look around. There was no one else in sight, then grabbed the man's shoulder and pulled him upright. He might not be able to stop Tema and a few others from acting like this, but he could try to stop anyone else from seeing it. "Why not, Tema? Tema, look at me, please." "Why not? It is commanded, my lord," Tema said, still whispering. He kept dropping his eyes, not afraid but ashamed that he could not do what Rand asked. Shienarans took shame, the way other people took being branded a thief. No horse may leave this stable until the order is changed. Nor any stable in the keep, my lord. Rand had his mouth open to tell the man it was all right, but instead he licked his lips. "No horse from any stable." "Yes, my lord. The order came down only a short time ago. Only moments." Tema's voice picked up strength. "All the gates are closed as well, my lord. None may enter or leave without permission. Not even the city patrol, so Tema has been told." Rand swallowed hard, but it did not lessen the feeling of fingers clutching his windpipe. "The order, Tema. It came from Lord Agelmar? Of course, my lord. Who else? Lord Agelmar did not speak the command to Tema, of course, nor even to the man who did speak to Tema. But, my lord, who else could give such a command in Faldara? Who else? Rand jumped as the biggest bell in the keep bell tower let out a sonorous peal. The other bells joined in, then bells from the town. If Tema may be bold, the groom called above the reverberations, my lord must be very happy. Rand had to shout back to be heard. Why? The welcome is finished, my lord. Tema's gesture took in the bell tower. The Amelin seat will be sending for my lord and my lord's friends to come to her now. Rand broke into a run. He just had time to see the surprise on Tema's face, and then he was gone. He did not care what Tema thought. She will be sending for me now,